Senator Singh.
Thank you, Madam Acting Deputy President. Well, following the announcement earlier today by the opposition leader, I'm pleased to be appointed Shadow Parliamentary Secretary to the Environment, Climate Change and Water. Tasmania is the jewel in Australia's environmental crown, and as a proud product of the Apple Isle, a person born in Hobart and educated there, as someone who has raised their children there in this beautiful island, I am very honoured to be entering into this portfolio on a day when the future of Tasmania's environment has been at the centre of global attention, and the coalition government's attempt to remove protections over large areas of it has been rejected by the international community following campaigns around Australia and successful advocacy by Labor activists and members of Parliament. I look forward to working with Shadow Minister Mark Butler to ensure that we continue to hold the environmental policies of the Abbott government, or indeed the lack of them, up to the public scrutiny, and to fight for the ecological future of the nation in the interests of all Australians and of our children and grandchildren to come. I thank and acknowledge the work of Senator Louise Pratt, a remarkable woman and a valuable advocate for Labor principles whose loss in this place is deeply felt. I also thank Mark Dreyfus for working with me whilst I was Shadow Parliamentary Secretary in the Attorney-General portfolio. I look forward to the new challenges ahead and the continued fight against the Abbott government's attempt to destroy the advances in environmental policy undertaken under Labor, from climate change measures such as the implementation of the emissions trading schemes to the protection of our national heritage. It is an important moment in the politics of the environment, both here and in Australia and around the world, and I am honoured to be entrusted with the responsibility of this portfolio at such a time. As global attention focuses on our country with the meeting of the UNESCO World Heritage Committee in Doha over the last week and its rejection of the Abbott government's application to remove World Heritage protection from 74,000 hectares of Tasmanian wilderness, the importance of Labor's opposition to the environmental destruction of the coalition government and its misguided priorities becomes even more apparent. Given his inactions in attempting to remove such an important heritage area from the UNESCO World Heritage List, it would be more accurate to describe Minister Greg Hunt not so much as a Minister for the Environment, as more as a Minister against the environment. We should also remember the importance of the role that many of my Labor colleagues played in opposing this legislation. In May, Shadow Environment Minister Mark Butler and Shadow Minister for Foreign Affairs Tanya Plibersek wrote to all signatories of the World Heritage Convention to reject Tony Abbott's proposal, citing the potential to cause irreparable damage to the outstanding universal values of the Tasmanian wilderness. And while Tony Abbott was telling people around the globe wrongly that the area was degraded and not worthy of World Heritage status, attempting to demean the value of this outstanding piece of wilderness and beauty in the eyes of the international community, it was Labor who defended Australia's ecological reputation and argued for the importance of protecting this jewel in our green heritage. The government's application lacked any logical basis to the claim that the listing criteria did not apply to the area in question. The assertion that it was degraded was disproved by the report from the Department of Environment, a report which only came to light after the application had gone in. Perhaps the most damning statement about the weakness of this application, an international intervention which cost the Australian taxpayer large amounts of government money to engage in, came from the Portuguese delegation to the committee, which stated, "The justification presented to the reduction are, to say the least, feeble. Accepting this delisting today would be settling an unacceptable precedent impossible to deny in similar circumstances in the future. If this committee cares for conservation according to responsible engagement of state parties to the Convention when they submit their nominations, We cannot accept these requests to delist. So some may say that the recklessness which has marked the Abbott regime's approach to government was present in Minister Hunt's strategic folly. But it is a recklessness which threatens not only Australia's international credentials, but also the infliction of irreparable damage on the outstanding universal values of the Tasmanian wilderness. What message does it say if the Abbott government's delisting of a World Heritage Area in Tasmania is to come through? It says, this area has been trashed, why come here? That has no economic benefit for Tasmania. It is actually selling down our state at a time when we know that it is a wilderness, it is the environment of Tasmania that has such an economic benefit, a tourism benefit to our state. Yet here was a government willing to actually go out there to the international community, to the Australian community, and talk it down so much so on a false premise. Well, Minister Hunt's attitude at the end of the day does seem, I have to say, very curious, putting forward a rather careless defence of his actions. He asserted that he had fulfilled the promise he had made at the election for the delisting simply by making the application and attempting to get the committee to change the position. The committee has not approved the Australian government's request. Australia accepts and will consider the decision of the World Heritage Committee, he said. So now, here we are, in the wake of the countless breach of trust with the Australian election. It is good enough for a Minister of the Crown to attempt to implement an election promise in order for the Coalition to consider their commitments fulfilled. At a time when new consensus is emerging around the world that opens up the possibility for us to address the challenges of climate change, as emissions trading schemes are implemented in more and more nations, it is deeply concerning that the reactionary principles of the Abbott government are threatening to turn Australia back and remove us from playing our role and indeed leading the way in this important historical development. So moving on from the successful protection of the Tasmanian World Heritage Area today, there is still so much more for Labor to do and to fight for against the Coalition's attack on the environment in the years ahead. But having said the fact that the Coalition did try to downgrade Tasmania's wilderness forests, to downgrade the World Heritage Area status that Tasmania's wilderness forests so rightly deserve, we know that the commercial sector in itself is recognising the value of Tasmania's wilderness, because another remarkable achievement was made today, and it was made by a major commercial company in Australia, and that is Virgin Airlines. Virgin Australia today announced an expansion of its carbon offset program, launching a new partnership with the Tasmanian Land Conservancy. So from now on in, the Fly Carbon Neutral will be a voluntary option for all domestic and international customers to involve themselves in paying a fee in their online booking process. And in doing so, that will have another benefit on Tasmania's wilderness. We know so much about the value of Tasmania's wilderness and how much it means to Tasmanians and indeed the rest of Australia. It is the jewel in Australia's crown, and I do encourage Minister Greg Hunt to actually come and visit some of our beautiful forests, to actually see for himself what it was that he was trying to delist. Take the lead that Shadow Ministers Tony Burke and Mark Butler have both taken in going into these areas and seeing for themselves why it's so important that these areas are protected. So as we have the People's Republic of China moving to sustainable resources towards the creation of emission trading schemes, joining the European Union, American states as well as large as California and other countries around the world, Labor will also continue to advocate for Australia's environment and for leading policy development and practice in this area. I am really pleased in the outcome by UNESCO's World Heritage Committee today to protect Tasmania's World Heritage Area forests.
Thank you, Senator Singh. Senator Lyon.